Today's episode is brought to you by Mia Plastic Surgery. At Mia Plastic Surgery, they believe in enhancing your natural and inherent beauty while helping you to achieve the look and confidence that you deserve. They also employ a number of minimally invasive services to address your concerns and meet your goals. They specialize in a variety of medical procedures of the face, breast, body, and intimate areas. Dr. Fee Nguyen, known as the Pageant Doc, is the official aesthetic sponsor for Miss USA, Miss Texas, and Miss Houston. For more information, please visit allaboutmia.com. Welcome back, guys, to another installment episode. I'm still deliberating on what I'm calling these things, right? So I think this is just the next one of the Dumb Show. I'm your host, Omar Marcos. I am really, really excited about today's episode, installment, whatever this is. You know when you're playing a video game and you know the final boss is coming and it's been a trek and a journey just to even get that far, and then you're like, oh my God, the final boss is coming. Today is the final boss. Today is the season finale of this show that we're doing, right? I have an amazing guest today. I'm just going to give her the bio that she gave me because she deserves to have everything recognized about her because she's quite an amazing individual. And then I'm going to kind of talk briefly about how I know her. And then we're going to get right into it. My guest today is Jen Pinkerton. She is a psychotherapist, a sexologist, a writer, a speaker, founder and host of her own podcast, the Redhead Reveal podcast, private practice owner of Pinkerton Psychotherapy, and author of the book, The Good Rabbit, not to be mistaken with The Bad Rabbit. As a change agent, she helps people reveal their connectedness within their relationships and sexuality, understanding root causes of beliefs and behaviors that hold them back from success. She assists them in returning to the person they were born to be before they were limited by trauma. That's crazy, affecting me, because I look at society as a whole today, and who isn't affected by trauma? I feel like the entire populace of anywhere you go has had trauma in their lives, has had some kind of hiccup or some source of disruption that creates a friction in their lives. And here you have a person who's an expert in the field of course correcting those behaviors. And I'm thrilled to be able to just kind of delve into that subject because I know it'll benefit me, and to the people that are listening and watching this, it's going to definitely benefit them. So ladies and gentlemen, Jen Pinkerton on The Dumb Show.
Thank you for having me, Omar. I'm excited to be here.
We've kind of been planning this for a while. You wanted to see what I was doing, and I immediately recognized that you'd be perfect for this. When I first started creating the show, I was in ground zero, so to say, of my trauma. Needless to say, I've had plenty of it my entire life. Grew up raised by my mother because my father was not a great person. Many mistakes throughout my life, divorce, things of that nature. And for me, it all culminated to last September, 2022, where it just all came to a fold. I just realized that I'm raising this beautiful, amazing daughter of mine, Harper, and I'm just fast forwarding through time. I'm like, what if she ends up dating somebody that's similar to me because she sees my behavior? Or what if she even recognizes my behavior as she gets older? I don't even want her to realize that her dad was that way, right? So I, introspectively, I was like, I got to make a lot of changes, right? I'd been to therapy before when I was married and did the whole couples counseling thing. And, I have some semblance of knowledge of what that entails and stuff. And September really was that pivot point for me. I did the 180. I haven't done therapy to kind of talk about it. This may be something we could discuss later. But the new perspective that I gave myself, the changes that I immediately made, and some of them were grand in nature. I ended Runway Houston, which is a big project of mine. Started limiting my interactions with people on social media. I even went dark for a while, a couple of months, took myself off social media. And then I came back. I decided to create The Dumb Show based on the dumb things that men do. But it's really society as a whole. And I've known what you've done for a while, right? But you kind of as I started limiting the people that I was interacting with on social media, the algorithm's kind of weird. You start eliminating the noise, and you start seeing more things that you'd rather see.
Exactly.
So then I started seeing more of your posts. And, saw your book challenge that you're doing this year. And so like, you were more up on the wall, right? Of things that were appearing on my wall. So I reached out to you, and yeah, here you are. And I do want to like kind of jump right into like a little bit of what you do so that we can get into like the meat of the discussion.
Okay.
So just briefly talk about, in your own words, what you do.
Certainly. I really focus on helping people return to who they are supposed to be. And what I mean by that is that we're really born perfect, and we get limited by our trauma that we experience or societal concerns or life experiences. You know, some of us can recognize that we have a lot of trauma. We can recognize that it's held us back. Some of us are just highly resilient, and so we're not affected in that way. And some of us have really maladaptive coping skills, so we think we're fine, but we're not really fine. But all of those things contribute to how you show up in a relationship. They really affect how you function. They affect what was modeled for you. They really determine what your norm is going to be. And you bring all that in. And so then if a relationship is failing or it's struggling, undoubtedly, those are some things that are important to look at. So I've really made my primary focus to help people with relationships, with connection. Connection can also be with family members where that trauma's been an issue and a struggle. I also am a doctoral candidate in clinical sexology. So I do a lot of sex work and intimacy work with my couples or with individuals, if that's also a struggle in their relationship. So it all kind of comes full circle. I have my own private practice, Pinkerton Psychotherapy, and I have an amazing team of therapists that all have their own specialty that's different from mine. So we can really have a cohesive way to serve a lot of different people.
Is there anything else that you missed there?
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, I have a podcast, Redhead Reveal, as well. And I'm a writer and speaker, and I just really enjoy sharing this message. I think that personally for me, if I would have had that kind of message when I was much younger, when I was in those early dating years, I think I would have, done a lot of things different.
Yeah.
But in hindsight, I'm glad I have all my lived experiences because it's a culmination of creating who I am today and allowing me to have the reflection and the exposure and everything else that has helped me understand what I want to give back and what I want to help people with and how I can make a difference.
Absolutely. Change nothing. Like everything that you've lived through, anybody, is the recipe of your life.
This is true.
And we are where we're supposed to be because that's how it was unfolded for us.
That's right.
Let's reverse a little bit there. Clearly, you're somebody that I would definitely want to speak with if I had any of those issues that have been aforementioned. But like, at what point in your life did you think that this is the route that you were going to take? Like, is this something that you always knew you wanted to do, or did something happen? Or
Well, I fell into therapy in a different way than maybe some of my peers. I've always been a writer. Writing has been really my passion for as long as I can remember. I even wrote as a child. I wrote people's thesis papers in college. I was always a writer. I've done a lot of, whether it's corporate writing, whether it's freelance writing, that's just been my thing.
Yeah.
And I originally wanted to go back and get my master's in psychology because I just liked the human condition. I liked understanding what made people tick, and really getting to the why and the meat of people was always interesting to me. So I thought if I went back and got my master's and coupled that with my writing and got those credentials, I'd be able to serve a bigger population. I'd be able to command more of an interest in my writing. But once I actually got into that, I really realized I love the art of holding space for someone. I wanted to attend to other people. And I recognized that it was such an amazing thing to learn and to grow in and to develop. And so I shifted gears a little bit and then got my master's in marriage and family therapy to become, licensed in Texas. I have a provisional license as a LMFT associate, which means you still have supervision for a short bit of time as well. And with doing that, I supplemented that with the coaching I was already doing as life coaching. And that life coaching was relational with relationship work. So this has all been kind of this building block to get me where I am now. And when I started my PhD program to do that as well, it's just kind of the last check mark that I needed to really feel like I can have this cohesive demonstration of here is everything I've collected. It's all about relational work. It's all about trauma. It's all about connection. And I want to be an expert in my field to really help other people be the best they can in those relationships, to show up in the best way they can for their partner, to not have the struggles that can be so mundane and you don't know how to get out of it. Those automatic triggers that hold you back, that you're bringing in everything that you've experienced. If you weren't seen when you were younger, you weren't heard, or if you felt like you had to only, perform to get the approval from your parents, then you might be performative in your relationship. If you find that you weren't seen or heard, or rejection or abandonment or issues for you, then those are triggers that when you're fighting or in a conflict conflict, that's going to be your go-to. And you become this person that is only reacting instead of responding. And so you're not able to be that adult and use your adult parts to think in a wise mind in that moment. Yeah. You're reverting to that young child that you haven't healed. And that doesn't do you any good. It doesn't serve anybody relationally.
Is that very common? Because like a lot of people, I'm just going to use myself as an example. Let's not even go anywhere else. You see all the mistakes that you're making currently. A lot of those problems that people have, is it rooted in something that happened in childhood? Or
most often. I mean, some people are so reticent to think of that, oh, I had a great childhood. It had nothing to do with what I am today. What do you mean?
Yeah.
And it's not that you had a great childhood or a bad childhood. It's life is a spectrum, right? Everybody has different experiences. And you can have two children that grew up in the same household and someone was really affected by things and someone wasn't. And it's not necessarily just your parents or your primary caregivers, although those love lessons are really rooted there. It can also be trauma you experienced growing up, maybe not feeling like you belonged when you were in school, maybe having issues socially. Those things all contribute to who you are.
Yeah.
And when we're in a romantic relationship, that's the one time when vulnerability and authenticity really come to a head. And so anything that affects those two factors becomes really important.
Wow. I mean, so just looking at myself, because if you ask around about Omar in Houston, you'll probably get a varying spectrum of answers. I've been there, right? The newer Omar is more, people are only aware of that version of me if they're really close to me. Now the vast majority of the social circles in Houston probably are more cognizant of the Omar of the past, the player Omar, the guy that dated a lot of girls in town, and not to place blame. It's never a blame thing, but it's like why does he do this? Why does he date around? Why does he feel like he needs to constantly be hitting on women, this and that? And I look back at some of the things that have occurred in my life, right? Some of the big things. So for instance, my dad was a cheater. He was actually married when he met my mother, because he was able to live in two different states. He was able to travel for work, and because of that, he was able to continue a relationship with my mother. And then I was born. When my mother found out, she gave me an ultimatum. She's like, here's how it's going to go down. You leave Omar with me, full custody. You don't fight for it. I don't ask for child support. You walk away. You retain your marriage and do whatever it is that you want over there. Or we can take it to court, and then everybody's going to find out, and you'll probably be left with nothing. So clearly he chose the easier option and just left me with my mom. So that kind of happened. I have a little bit of memory of him kind of like leaving because I was like around 4 years old when that happened, and then finding out like in middle school how it happened, right? Jumping around from school to school. So here's the lineage of my school life: 3 different elementary schools, 2 different middle schools, and finally 1 high school in various different parts of Houston. So like I never had that prolonged relationship with friends growing up. Like everybody that I knew in high school had been going to school with their friends forever, since elementary school. So I never really had friends through school because I always had to hit reset every time that I saw. My best friend was my mom growing up. And then I immediately launched into the military, and then the vast assortment of personalities that I was thrust into, broken family people, people that have been divorced, people that have been to jail, like all these different things were now influence in my life. Then I come back in my mid-20s to go to start school, and, then I started doing the photography thing, started meeting people in the media circles, and then Runway Houston, and I became very toxic as a person because it gave me a lot of level of power, influence. My cultural impact in the city was heightened, escalated immensely. So it's like I have all these things that I could put blame on why I was the way I was, but like, what would it be for somebody like me, right? What's the reason? I'm not saying for you to dissect me right now, but it's like when you get a client, where do you start, right? That has so much baggage in their life. Do you dissect each chapter of their lives, or how does that work?
Well, first, I want to at least acknowledge before I answer that question that must have been really difficult for you, because that's a lot of struggle to grow up in that way. Your father having such duality and the abandonment that you must have felt, and those issues, those show up for you regardless. Until we heal from those feelings, until we address them, we don't let go of any of that. And so that is fundamentally important and shapes you and who you are. And I would imagine it probably caused you to do a lot of repeats of certain kind of things in your relationships. And you might look around and wonder, if all these relationships are failing, am I the common denominator? And what am I doing here?
Yeah.
And that probably, I would imagine, had some sort of influence in your pivot that you wanted to do, and this new, rebirth that you've wanted to have for yourself, that I've seen on social media, and you become more wellness oriented. You become different in the way that who you associate with and what you're doing. And I think that's obvious to a lot of people, because that's what we look for, right? We want to see that in people. We want to see that if someone else is leveling up or they're growing, that also helps us level up and grow to stay with them. As people and humans, we either grow together or we grow apart. So I think I want to acknowledge that part of what you said first before I answer your question, because I do think that it's important to recognize, I had all these contributing factors and they did affect me. And, if they still are a bother for me, if they still show up in some ways, if I can't feel like I control them, if I'm emotionally dysregulated, especially in conflict, that's our number one cue. If I'm always being dysregulated and everything causes me to be really reactive instead of responsive, I probably have some stuff I need to work on. So to get back to your question, though, yes, I think that it's important to look at that. It's important to recognize, if I'm struggling, what is the why? Because the why is where the transformation begins.
What do you feel like? Because, you probably get a multitude of different individuals that come with different sorts of problems. Where's the majority of this stuff come from? Like, in terms of infidelity, in terms of losing connectiveness, because you are a connective expert. Mm-hmm. Where does the beginning of the end start?
Sure. Well, those are two different questions, but the first one about infidelity, there's a lot of reasons why people cheat. I think often people have this idea that it has to be one or two things, but it's not. There's a myriad of concerns of things that contribute, and trauma is one of the biggest parts of that. But there's truly concrete reasons that researchers have learned and explored to understand that these are contributing factors. These are things that can exacerbate pre-existing conditions. You may deal with someone that has a lot of ego concerns, and they may be someone that's dealing with some personality disorders. You may have somebody that has just a lot of trauma, and they're really looking to be seen and heard and have that attention that feels good because they haven't really felt good. You may deal with someone that's looking at a different life crisis in the moment, and they're really not sure about who their identity is, and they're trying to do this identity building in a very maladaptive way. You might have someone that has a mismatched sexual desire with their partner, and so they're seeking that outside the relationship because they don't know how to communicate that. They don't know how to address that. You may have someone that has a struggle with addiction or something else that, again, is rooted in trauma, but that they're not recognizing as affecting their relationship. Sometimes, infidelity happens because there's this idea that, you don't see your partner, and maybe you live separate lives, or maybe you don't connect in that way. And that lack of connection oftentimes is related to disassociation, the thing you learned growing up, that skill set, that coping to kind of, distract yourself when things don't feel good. And so instead of leaning in and loving when it's hard, to actually do that work to understand what you need, what your partner needs. And if you don't know what you need, to uncover what you need, that's when that work, can make a big difference. And then your relationship, basically the old one dies and a new one is reborn with all that work. Yeah. And so I think that from your question about infidelity, a lot of infidelity can be, repaired and recovered from. It takes a lot of work, and it's very heartbreaking. But when you learn why that's happening, when you discover the reasons why people might step outside of whatever agreement they have, it really can be kind of an eye-opening experience. But a lot of people don't seek any help for that. They just end their relationship and move on. And that's the society we have, where they've made it very simple to do that. It's very easy to get a divorce. It's very easy to break up, and you move on, you forget about the other person. But in fact, if you take the time to recognize, I've invested how much time in this relationship, maybe I should actually do a little bit of explorative work. Maybe I should set aside the feelings and the pain that I'm dealing, and actually recognize, if I go get some help to process that pain and feeling, actually with my partner, and we uncover what's really going on, we could be able, recover from that.
Let's talk about a red flag there, because at what point do you feel like a couple, whether they're married or not, should say, we need help, right?
Well, from my point of view, I think that should start before you even become a real couple. I think premarital counseling is huge, and that is something that I'm doing a class right now, building a workshop that I'm going to sell online so people can do that online, because I think that if you can even understand some of the basic foundations that everybody should cover before they're in a serious relationship, you would eliminate so many issues in the future. But separate from that, when you're already dating someone, you find that you're getting serious and you have that first conflict, that first big fight that everybody has. I think that's time to look at your partner. Does your partner react in a really emotionally dysregulated way? Are they screaming? Are they yelling? Do they do put downs? Do they stonewall and give you the silent treatment? Are they full of criticism and contempt? These are things you recognize. If someone has those those reactions, then you want to work on having better responses. But those reactions come from someplace. That's either learned or modeled behavior, or it's unhealed trauma, or it's an inner child part that really hasn't been able to grow into an adulthood in a very healthy way. And so those are all things that can be resolved. So I think when you have that first big fight, that first big conflict, you recognize that. Now, what if instead you have a partner that actually meets you where you are and says, hey, I understand that I hurt your feelings. I'm so glad you told me. How can I be different? What can I do different for that? I want to be accountable for that. I want to be able to repair and recover from this in a very healthy way. Let's have this kind of relationship where we communicate and we talk. Well, then you're in a totally different situation, aren't you? But everyone can get to that point. Everyone has the capacity to get to that point if they'll be, number one, curious about it. And number two, they're going to show up in an authentic and vulnerable way. And therapy is usually the best way to do that.
It's better to be proactive than reactive.
For sure.
Wow. Okay. In an instance of that, where somebody meets you at your level, or even just tries to be the logical one, because that word can be very detonative.
Logical?
If you try to be logical in certain instances, if it's in the heat of the moment, right, the logical one can also often get lost in translation in the heat of the argument.
Well, but can I stop you there for 1 second, Omar?
Yeah.
Because, in the heat of the moment is a whole different thing, because in the heat of the moment, we need to have a set of rules. Every couple needs to have a set of an idea, an agreement they have of how do we handle the heat of the moment.
It should just be established.
I'm
going to write this stuff down.
Right away, to be able to say, hey, you know what? I've learned as a person, maybe you're the kind of person that you shut down. You find when it's so full of conflict, you immediately, your defenses wall up and you shut down and you want to separate, or you want to flee, or you want to go. Well, you've got to be able to tell your partner, hey, this is something that's my go-to. I don't want to do that. I'm working on that. Let's set an agreement that if I need to do that, instead of just fleeing, which might trigger your partner's abandonment issues, or might cause a whole nother fight because you refuse to talk or connect or deal with the issue. What if you said to your partner, okay, I need us to know that if I tell you I need some space, that you're going to give me 30 minutes. And I'm going to go do whatever I need to do. I'm going to calm down. I'm going to play a video game. I'm going to scroll on TikTok. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to listen to music. I'm going to take a walk, whatever it is, to reset your nervous system. Because what's happening in our body in that moment is truly a nervous system response. It's those danger signals that flight or fight or freeze or fawn comes into play. And that is a response system that we cannot control. But what we can do is recognize what happens, and before it starts, to be able to say, hey, this is going to happen. This is how I respond and react, and I don't want to do that. So if you can meet me where I am and you can give me 30 minutes, then I will come back and initiate the conversation with you so we can pick up where we were, when I'm able to be regulated and calm and be able to talk this out because you matter to me.
I know what the answer is going to be to this question, but do you recommend that couples write things down? In terms of like their journey, trigger points, things of that nature. Just because, like you just alluded to right now, you said that in the heat of the moment, you should probably take a pause because your body's reacting in a way.
Well, there's a power in the pause. And I tell everybody that power in the pause.
Yeah.
You will get more out of life if you pause in moments when you're feeling all that inside you, because we feel it. I mean, we all feel it. Our body is our really biggest indicator. When you do that inventory of how we feel, and you do the body scan of, I can feel it. I'm either tense, or I'm fisting, or I feel like my head's getting hot, or I feel nauseous, or everybody has some sort of go-to physical somatic response when they're angry, or they're upset, or they're dysregulated. And when you can learn that, and that's your cue, then you're able to go, whoa, wait, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. I just feel like for me, and I can only talk about me because I'm not in any other experiences, but in the heat of that moment, right, when you do take a pause, I feel like I can probably lose my thought process because I have ADHD. My mind wanders very fast. And so things I may be wanting to discuss in that moment, probably will wane or go away altogether by the time 30 minutes has elapsed or an hour or whatever, however long the break may be.
Right.
So
While your partner
the writing
sure.
thing. Yeah.
Yes, while your partner's taking that moment that they need to reset, if you're the partner that has all those thoughts and is waiting for that conversation to be initiated again, then you can write them down. You can make bullet points of what's important to you so that you're sure that you address it, so something doesn't be left unaddressed in your relationship. But you touched on something important. You mentioned ADHD, and I will tell you that if you are neurodivergent, which is what ADHD falls into, being somewhere along that spectrum can actually really influence your relationships as well. People that are, do have some sort of neurodivergency show up and function differently in relationships. And that's another key factor. If you go and you address that in therapy and you learn some social skills, some ways to understand who you are and how you react and respond and how you function, then you can better show up in that relationship in a different way.
I have no doubt that it has definitely affected relationships I've been in because of the expediency in which my mind goes. I always feel like I need to be stimulated at all times. It doesn't have to be sexual. It doesn't have to be romantically, anything, right? With any projects that I do, it's part of the reason I did the dump show.
Do you look at your partner to be the stimulation for you?
When I'm with that person, yes.
The answer is yes, I can tell.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so like, for instance, if I go do something, like we go to the museum, right? I don't want my partner to like be on her phone, right? We're in a museum. Let's enjoy the moment.
Well, that's not necessarily lack of stimulation, Omar. That's just rude.
Sure, I agree. But in terms of like different things that we're doing, right? So like I can go to the museum or I can go to a sports game or I can go to, but that's just how I am. So I feel like because I'm so vast in my interest points that it's sometimes possibly, I'm not tooting my own horn here, but it's possibly hard to keep up with my mental capacity.
So what would it look like if you told your partner that? If you said, hey, you know what? I am really this person.
Would that be rude?
How is that rude?
Hear me out. Hey.
Hear me out and listen to my version of it, because I bet my version of delivery might be different than yours.
I bet it is.
So what if your delivery sounded something like this? And you said, hey, you know what, babe? I really like to go, and I'm constantly moving and thinking about the next thing, and that's just the way my mind works. But I want you along for the ride with me. But hey, if sometimes you feel like I'm 9 steps ahead of you, tell me. Tell me in this way, because if you tell me in this way, I'm going to receive it in a good way because I'll know that's what you're doing. And I want to be able to stop because I want to be intentional about being with you, and I want to be present with you. And I certainly don't want you to feel like I'm off to the next thing and I'm not sitting with you in the space that we have together.
I wish I was a billionaire so I could just hire you full time just to like walk next to me. Be like, you don't need to work anymore, Jen. You just be my consultant here.
Well, although that sounds beautiful, Omar, you actually have all the skill sets to learn how to do this on your own. You just might need a little bit of help.
I totally recognize that. Okay, wow, where do we go from there? Because like, I feel like I could talk to you forever about my shit, right? I do want to touch on some other things though.
Great. Although I have no problem talking to you about your shit either.
No, I'm gonna come. I'm definitely gonna come see you because like I feel like I've just grown just by talking to you just now, right? I asked you what your biggest challenge was, right? And you said that it's just sad seeing so many relationships fail from infidelity or lack of intimacy. Like, do those experiences that you have with your patients, and I know you're not going to divulge any instances specifically, but like, have any of them affected you? Have a reverse reaction to how you live your life, or have you grown from your patients?
Okay, well, first, let me clarify that in my business, we call them clients, not patients, because patients to me, no, I want to tell you why the reasoning is though. Yeah. Patients to me, and some therapists do refer to their clients as patients, but to me, patients is rather pathological. That means like something's wrong with you. And I don't believe that any of us are broken. I don't believe that we have to be fixed. I think that we're actually perfect who we are. We're showing up as ourselves. And all that needs to be done is to return to that person we're born to be. We're not these broken people walking around that have to go to somebody to please fix me. I don't look at it that way. Yeah. I look at it as this collaborative process where you're going to talk to me about what happens to you, and I'm going to talk to you about what I see, what those patterns are, the insight I have, and the perspectives I can share with you. It's a joint thing. You know, you can call me a connection expert, but I'm not. The truth of the matter is, sure, that's a branding thing. I mean, I can say that because, yes, that's what I focus on, but connection really happens with you. And when we're in a room together and I'm holding space for you, and I look at it as a privilege and an honor for you to share with me these really intimate thoughts and feelings and experiences, I'm able to help you see things that you just can't see on your own. And I don't look at it as patience in that way, because
Yeah.
you're a client, and the
Makes
fact
total
that,
sense.
that I want to work together with
Yeah.
you. Also, while I am a psychotherapist and sexologist, I also do life coaching. And sometimes the coaching aspect is better fit and it's different than therapy. And I think that's important to mention, because some people have a lot of stigma about therapy. They have a lot of feelings of, hey, I have a lot
I
of
certainly
trauma
do.
and I do not want to touch that trauma.
Yeah.
And while I will maintain that I think it's important to do that, I can also certainly agree that I would rather someone have some help rather than no help. And even if you come and you say, hey, Jen, I just want to talk to you about life coaching. I want to come have a coaching appointment with you to tell me what in the hell is happening in these relationships. What's going on? And most likely you're the common denominator. But we're going to figure out why. We're going to figure out what you can do differently. And I can help you understand different skill sets that help you relationally, so you can thrive. Okay? But your question was about what I learned from my clients, I
Yeah.
think. So, I think that everybody has a unique life experience, and it would be probably unnatural for me to not take a collection of understanding. Wow, with this couple, I saw this and I hadn't exactly seen that thing. So I want to remember what really worked there, and I might want to apply what worked there, whatever approach I utilize, and use it here. But that would be the kind of probably extent of that part of it. I think that there's no therapist or coach or theorist or anyone in this space that I'm in that doesn't have their own lived experiences that contribute and show up for them. There's kind of a joke about most therapists have had a significant amount of trauma or they wouldn't be a therapist. But, I think we all suffer from that. I think that people, though, that are in the space I'm in have more of an ownership of, hey, yeah, it affected me and I refuse to let it do that anymore. And I'm going to be different now. And with that being different and with that growth and that healing and the self-awareness I have, I'm going to help other people.
You touched on something there that I want to talk about, because you mentioned the stigma that people have towards therapists and towards
Yes.
therapy as a whole. I definitely fell into that category, because I know when I was married, I had mentioned getting a divorce with my ex-wife, and she shot it down. We're going to go to therapy. And I was like, I kind of scoffed at it. I'm like, what are they going to tell us about us, right? So I fell into that category at that point in time in my life. And in certain instances, I can kind of see how somebody, and I was talking to Ashley about this prior to you arriving. Do you feel like certain people, well, I guess this is two sides. So let me just touch on the stigma. How do you convey that to somebody that needs to break that barrier of, I don't need therapy. It's not for me. It's stupid. It's just,
Sure.
what could they possibly tell me about my own life?
Well, the first part I would say is, I'm not going to tell you something about your own relationship. You're the expert in your relationship. The only person that knows what goes on in a relationship are those two people in it. I need you to tell me. You're going to actually tell me about your relationship. You're going to tell me about what is a problem for you. You're going to tell me about what kind of fights you have. What does conflict look like? How do you respond to conflict? Do you ever apologize? Do you know what a true apology is? Do you understand what the root causes are of behaviors that are really affecting you? Most people make zero connection between their childhood, their upbringing, their lived experiences, and then how they are today. Yet aren't we really a compilation of all those things?
Absolutely.
I mean, if you learn how to play baseball when you're 9 and you go off to be an amazing baseball player, wouldn't we say, sure, it was probably all the hard work that they did, all the training they did, everything they learned in a formative years that got them to this place where they continue to propel, to work hard, to achieve, and be this great baseball player, right?
Amalgam of everything.
Right. So why do we not look at that in relationships? And yet very few people do. And I think that's really the missing part. So when anyone says to me, and I hear it all the time, oh God, I don't want to go to therapy. I don't want to deal with that. And what do you know that you're going to tell me about my relationship? Well, I'm not going to tell you about your relationship. But what I can do, and if I can quote one of my favorite therapists, Terry Real, he says, if you show me the thumbprint, I'll show you the thumb. And that's really true. If you tell me, hey, these are some of the things that happen. This is what we do. These are the cycles we're in. This is the dance we do in our relationship. I'm able to help you trace that back. And then once we understand where it's from, we can heal from that. We can feel those feelings, process those feelings, heal from that, and recognize, hey, we're going to let those child parts stay there. We're going to show up as the adult we are. We're going to use this wise mind instead of a completely emotionally dysregulated mind. And we're going to have a totally different relationship.
Wow. Very enlightening. The other side of that I want to touch on is, do you feel like recently, this is definitely within the last 5 years, I'd say, the whole mental health thing might have possibly opened the floodgates for using it as a crutch. I'm going to say it like this, right? So I'm a sports guy. I've been watching basketball, any sports in general. I'll use basketball as an example here. In the 90s, Michael Jordan was the player, right? He was the GOAT, undoubtedly. But you never saw him have a defeatist mentality. You never saw him take breaks. You always saw him like compete at the highest level.
Right.
And it showed in his accolades.
Right.
6 championships, MVPs galore, all the things. I mean, he even went so far to punch his teammates in practices, right? But nobody's going to argue that he's not the greatest of all time. Nowadays, you have players in the league that are great players. Not as great as Michael Jordan, but there's this whole mental health thing, right? And there's people that are saying, oh, I need to take a break off from playing the game. Or Ben Simmons, for instance, took the whole year off because his mental health, right? Do you think that because it's becoming more into the light, mental health issues, and people that need therapy, that people are using as an excuse to get away with things in life, being a good father, being a good mother, being present for work, being present for anything in that?
Sure.
Is it being utilized in a wrong manner?
I think that sometimes it is, but I want to reference a sentence that I think that if we all look at it this way, it's eye-opening, and that you're not responsible for what happened to you. Okay, it wasn't your fault, and it's not because of you, but you are responsible for what you become, and you're responsible for what you do with yourself and what you do with your life experiences. So what that means to me is that, you can have a victim mentality, or you can decide to be the kind of person that wants to recover and heal from things that are holding you back. And you want to have a growth mindset, and you want to level up. So I certainly think that there's space for someone like the example you gave me about, hey, I need time off for my mental health. That may be true. I don't know that person or that person's particular issues.
Yeah.
And I do think that it's more accepted now to say that versus years ago. If you said that, people might have laughed at you. So I think for that portion of it, I don't have an issue with that. Each person knows what they need and the time they need it. But the issue comes with more of, I'm going to be a victim, and I'm going to say that these things happen to me and I can't ever get ahead in life. And I have this black or white thinking, this cognitive distortion, false belief system, which is basically, I'm never going to achieve anything. This shit happened to me. It was horrible. My life is horrible. I'm never going to succeed. I'm never going to thrive. Okay, but those are false belief systems.
Yeah.
You're going to become what you want to become if you'll put the work in to do that. But the work sometimes is mostly emotional, and a lot of people are really scared of that because vulnerability is terrifying to people. But vulnerability is the key to most everything, honestly. Because when you become vulnerable, you're showing someone who you really are. Your authentic self can come out. And while you may run the risk of someone hurting you or being rejected, you actually also risk never having the reward of having true connection with somebody.
I've been told that I've been vulnerable.
Well, yay.
Yeah. Like my best friend Claudia, she'll call me a sensitive beast because it's like both, right? Do you think that being too vulnerable can be a bad thing?
Too vulnerable, that's the juxtaposition of those two words is problematic for me. I think that being vulnerable and showing someone who you are is an amazing thing. However, I will also say, though, is that we do have to think about who deserves to hear our story, who deserves to have access to us.
You said that in the questionnaire.
And I mean that because, if we vomit up everything horrible we've ever had in our life to just anyone we meet, number one, are they ready to receive that?
Yeah.
Number two, do they even care? And number three, are we minimizing and dismissing what makes us who we are?
Yeah.
I think that we have to decide who we surround in our life that deserves to hear our story.
Yes.
And people who can meet us where we are, people who look at that privilege of knowing us intimately and knowing us in that way. That's beautiful. I don't think there's a risk of being too vulnerable. And what I mean by that is that if you're sharing things and you're being authentic, well, that's great. But that is different than your story. That is different than saying, let me go ahead and tell you every single thing that happened to me the moment I tell you, hi, my name's Jen.
Yeah, airing your dirty laundry.
That doesn't, that doesn't help them or you. You're not going to feel good about that. When you walk away and you don't get the response that you wanted, that's going to make you feel bad. And sometimes that starts a shame cycle. Why do we want to do that? We want to actually connect with people on the same level. We want to make certain that we are surrounding ourselves with people that have a growth mindset, that are self-aware, that want to be on the path of being the best version of themselves and the best that they can be and returning to the person they're born to be. If we do that and we have people like that in our life, then we're all going to thrive.
On the heels of that, people that divulge too much, and I can be guilty of that. Just because I really are certain people in my life, whether I want to admit it or not, I want them to see this change that I've made, right? And these are people that aren't necessarily in my life anymore, that I've made the disconnect, but I kind of in a roundabout manner wish that they would see, like, look.
Why are they so important to you, Omar?
Because they cast a judgment on me, right? And I feel like some people's judgment matters more than others. Like if some random person said, hey, you're a piece of shit, I'd be like, cool, have a great day, like whatever, right?
Right.
But if somebody that I allowed into my life on an intimate level, not necessarily romantically, but like a friend, a former friend, and kind of did see those dark aspects of Omar, and rightfully so, felt like they needed to segregate from who I was.
So you felt as though you might have caused them harm in some way?
No, I felt
or
like they
hurt them, or what?
Maybe tarnished their image by affiliating with me at the time, right?
Okay.
Not so much hurt. It's like, oh, that guy's a piece of shit. Why are you affiliating with him? Are you a piece of shit? So, in that sense, right? Did I hurt them? No, but did I probably affect their reputation? Sure, right? These are people that I acknowledge shouldn't be in my life anymore.
And why is that? Why have you made that decision?
I feel like if somebody can know you at that level, and you feel like you've made this change, this shift to become a better person, and despite that, still can cut you off, right? At the time that you probably needed them the most, says more about them than me, because I'm willing to accept my faults and make that change. They just couldn't deal with it anymore, and I get it, rightfully so. But because I've made that decision that I don't want that person to be in my life anymore, I do wish only one thing, and that's that they would see the positive change I've made. And again, like when I share things, sometimes I share too much, but sometimes I've gotten response from that saying, hey, look, I see the change. It's kind of motivated me to do something about my life and this and that. Like, it doesn't happen often, but it's happened a few times. And that makes me feel good about me sharing some of the things that I've shared.
Certainly.
So yeah, I feel like sometimes when I share, I want them to see that, and I don't know if I should feel that way.
Well, I think that's difficult to answer because you'd probably have to look at each relationship separately rather than a collective whole.
Yeah.
But I think that we also have to look at boundaries. I mean, boundaries are badass and everybody needs to have them. And if somebody created a boundary with you in their life, you know, that's about them. Boundaries are not for other people. That's about the decisions we make for ourselves about who we want in our life and why, and who deserves access to us and why.
Yeah.
You know, I would probably recommend that on your growth that you care more about you and not worry about other people so much.
I guess part of it also, and I forgot to mention this, is that there was a little bit of malice involved with it, and that after the breakaway, they kind of did things to try to tarnish my reputation and spread their knowledge, their intimate knowledge of me to others.
But see, you're touching on something really important you didn't mention earlier. You're talking about somebody that hurt you in some way or is trying to hurt you. And only hurt people can hurt others.
Oh,
so
I definitely know they're hurt.
So if they're hurting inside, then they probably participate in behaviors to hurt other people, namely like what you're talking about. And if someone's hurting inside and they're coming from a hurt place and not an emotionally healthy place at all, they're not going to be able to receive the changes that you've done in the way that you want them to, because they're not in a healthy place to do that.
That's something I didn't really think about. I want to wrap it up. We've been talking for quite a while. I feel like I could talk to you forever, but
well, thank you. I appreciate that.
What are some of the key takeaways that you feel? Let me rephrase that. What are some key points that you'd like to share to people listening that maybe lost, maybe feel like they just need that extra push?
Reach out to me,
Yeah.
You know, and if I'm not the person for you, reach out to somebody else. I think that all of us can benefit from improving, right? We improve in any way possible to be the best we can be. And from a therapy standpoint or from a coaching standpoint, you know, reach out to me. I'm certainly here and I want to be able to see people and help people. Listen to my podcast. I talk about a lot of topics. I think that we can all learn a lot of self-help and growth just from a massive standpoint way too. It doesn't always have to mean sitting with someone one-on-one. You know, I really use my social media in a way to share, you know, information consistently and constantly to be able to try to spread that message, to let people know, you know what, there's a different way of looking at things. And just the way we might have always looked at things isn't necessarily the right way, because where did that come from? What is our viewpoint created out of, you know? And I think that's a challenge to everybody. But anybody can send me an email, you know.
Yeah, we're going to throw that up there.
Pretty easy to find.
Yeah, we got your socials on there. We're going to link you so everybody knows how to funnel in your direction. What's next for you? Like, what do you got going on?
Well, I feel
like you got.
I do have a lot. I have a lot going on. I've, you know, my podcast is shifting a little bit right now. I started out in one way, and now I'm having a lot more guests and a lot more movement with that. So that's really exciting for me. I'm doing much more speaking than I was before. I really enjoy the message, sharing that message to people. I think that it's transformative. I think that it allows people to stop and question, how are we showing up? And that's the biggest question we really should all be asking ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And I like sharing that. So I'm doing a lot of speaking events. I speak to companies, I speak at events, and that's something I really love doing. And as I mentioned before, I'm a doctoral candidate. And so I'm about to have a book come out through my PhD program that's also about relationships. And that'll be, you know, in 2024 in the beginning of the year. So I have a lot of things in the pipeline, but honestly, I just love it all. I love what I'm doing. And I feel so grateful and have this, you know, this feeling of gratitude that I'm where I am today.
Not a slight to any of my previous guests, but I feel like this was it, right, for me. This is the intent of the show, to kind of pinpoint things that are occurring in life and how to course correct. And exponentially, you've affected me already just by us talking.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad to hear that.
And I hope that this will have a resonating effect on others that are listening, because I feel that you are in a position to help a lot of people. You are helping a lot of people, and I feel like you can help even more.
Thank you.
You're a beacon.
I appreciate that so much.
So I appreciate you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Omar. It was really great.
Absolutely. Guys, follow us on Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, all the things. We got some cool things exciting coming up. We're going to do some street segments. So we hope that you'll tune in. Thanks again, Jen, one last time for being on the show.
Thank you, Omar.
And we look forward to seeing your projects coming up. This
Awesome.
has been The Dumb Show. I am Omar Marcos.